Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. Alright, let's discuss Russian cinema. And no, we're not talking about Soviet-era mass film classics or even another of the latest cinematic efforts praising the aggression against Ukraine and making heroes out of trigger-happy Russians lobbing missiles at residential buildings in Kiev or Odessa. It's kind of close to the latter though, as we're talking about a film where the main protagonist is Vladimir Putin himself. The documentary is called RussiaKremlin Putin, 25 years. And there is no more Russian name you could ever think of, right? The film, made by Saida Medvedeva and Pavel Zarubin, is timed to coincide with the 25th anniversary of Vladimir Putin's time in power and presents a retrospective of events through the prism of stability, spirituality, and Russia's historical mission. Particular attention is paid to the idea of Russia's civilizational peculiarity, which Putin repeatedly emphasizes in his speeches. Now let's see one of the fragments of this documentary.
В основе нашего самосознания лежит все-таки не материальное благополучие, а морально-нравственная основа, которая является фундаментом и семьи, и государства, и будущего России. Все-таки в основе западной культуры, католической, протестантской культуре, на первое место всегда ставится материальное благополучие. Да, там тоже духовные вещи, конечно, существуют, но все-таки мерилом является материальный успех. В России нет. В России всегда, в широком смысле слова, говорят о нравственном начале. Такая глобальная идея всегда присутствует, морально-нравственная. Отсюда и постоянное желание у западного сообщества что-то откусить от России, как-то ее себе подчинить, сделать ее более послушной. Это происходит из века в век.
Despite socio-economic difficulties, international isolation and declining living standards, the Kremlin perseveres. Russia is not about consumption, but about higher meanings. In this context, moral and ethical values are presented as the basis of national resilience. Analysts note that this rhetoric is in sync with the general line of ideological separation from the West, which is regularly criticized in Russia for consumerism and loss of spiritual guidelines. Well, excuse me, but since when does spirituality involve crashing Shahed drones into Ukrainian cities? But since Shahed is Iranian for martyr, I suppose this is simply Moscow's own version of the love thy neighbor principle or something, waiting for Russian propagandists to actually spin it that way. Oh, and speaking of propaganda, Vladimir Putin has decided not to limit himself to words about spirituality and morality, but to back them up with an example. In the very same documentary, the audience was finally shown Putin's personal chambers at the Kremlin, and it was, without exaggeration, a visual manifesto of national staples. In several shots, viewers could witness gilded decorations, stucco moldings, heavy curtains, a white grand piano, a portrait of Emperor Alexander III, a personal gym, and what's even more ridiculous, Vladimir's own personal chapel.
Вот, собственно, и есть, да, квартира?
Да, это есть квартира. Как видите, недалеко.
Вы, получается, здесь часто ночуете? Да?
Последние 3 года в основном здесь.
За этим роялем успеваете иногда играть?
Очень редко. Библиотека, 2 спальни, домашняя церквушка.
A portrait of Emperor Alexander III, known for his autocratic views and the phrase Russia has only 2 allies, the army and the navy, attracted special attention here. This probably means, as the interior itself has hinted at, that Putin has no more allies, in fact. But, well, he has a grand piano. Maybe this apartment is a response to the sanctions. If the world does not sell luxury goods, why not build them right at the Kremlin? While ordinary Russians are choosing between paying for utilities and buying potatoes, the country's leader is living it up at the Kremlin with enough money to put a Billboard Top 10 rapper to shame, while also preaching about how material things don't really matter at all. And if you think this clip caused a wave of indignation in Russia, well, think again. Because the main message Putin is sending here is that he is not scared to show his own people how he actually lives. He's the 21st century Tsar, and no one can judge him, especially in his own country. Meanwhile, out on the front lines of Ukraine, some kid from Buryatia, with a few days of army training behind him, is about to get blown to bits by a drone, just so that Putin can afford his gold-plated fantasy at this and many other palaces and mansions. This is actually the real Kremlin ideology. No lives matter, Ukrainian, Russian, or otherwise, as long as it sustains the dictator's luxury lifestyle. The Kremlin is returning to its favorite trope, the Nazis. And of course, they never look in the mirror while saying this, because it's always somebody else, right? This time, according to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, and I quote, Nazis are again walking around with torches and throwing up their hands in Ukraine. Which, for the Russian propaganda machine, is evidence enough. Torches equals Nazis. Get it?
Украина, к сожалению, оказалась страной, где нацизм, вот эти ростки нацизма, они стали прорастать быстрее, чем в других странах Европы. И эти нацисты стали опять ходить с факелами, стали вскидывать руки. И эти нацисты, главное, стали пытаться оказывать влияние на действующую власть. И мы не могли не отреагировать на это. И наш президент сделал то, что он должен был сделать.
For a long time now, the Kremlin has followed a simple rule. If you don't like something, call it Nazism. And if you like something, call it our common heritage. If you closely follow how the Russian government explained to the world and citizens the reasons for the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, you can compose a full-fledged drama in 5 acts. Remember how Putin said he's starting the so-called special military operation because he wants to demilitarize Ukraine? Or just a year ago, Lavrov, who said that the war began because Ukraine, defying the Minsk agreements, stepped up their bombardment of the Donbas region. Well, no worries. We actually have some evidence to back it up.
Тот отверг наши декабрьские 21 года предложения, и когда в январе и феврале Украина, по-прежнему отвергая минские договоренности, объявила начало плана «Б», многократно повысив интенсивность бомбардировок Донбасса, у нас не было другого выбора, кроме как объявить специальную военную операцию. Президент об этом очень подробно говорил.
And then there is Kirill, the patriarch of Moscow, real name Gundyaev, ex-KGB, which should really tell you something, repeating that it's okay to eliminate people if you're fighting in God's name. There you go. It's a holy war now. And some of you frowned at the whole ISIS with snow meme. Well, anyway, listen to this.
Время так имеет место, когда для того, чтобы осуществлять это служение другим, нужно в первую очередь позаботиться о безопасности других. А когда возникает опасность тем, кто верен человеку во власти, тогда и меч из ножен обнажается. И вступает такой человек в борьбу, и кровь проливает, но не за свои амбиции, не за свое желание владеть и обладать и покорять, а движимый только одним – защитой тех, кто верен Богом, Его попечительству.
The Russian government and its propaganda wing will always find an excuse for any war they have started, or are yet to start. Usually it's imaginary Nazis, biolabs, or maybe the legendary Russian speakers, like in the Donbas, for example, where they needed protection so much that Russia had to bomb the hell out of them. Not bitter on logic, these guys, but when the whole country follows a dictator's folly, logic apparently comes a distant second. And with this, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.